And we welcome you to episode 11 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. I'm Scott MacArthur, Scotty Mac. He is Richard Griffin. And you can get Griff's entire catalog of work at griffsthepitch.com. Griffsthepitch.com. Head on over there. You'll find multiple weekly Blue Jays and Major League Baseball columns. Griff does a weekly power rankings column where he lists the teams 1 through 32 with a bit of an explainer for all. There are exclusive conversations with a lot of former Blue Jays and former Expos from back in the day who you love. And you can also get the Exit Philosophy podcast linked to griffsthepitch.com each and every week. And if you're watching on YouTube, Griff.
Yeah, Scotty, one point here is that I know you're a big Niners fan and an NFL fan.
Yeah.
And I do believe there's 32 teams in the NFL, but only 30 in baseball.
Did I say 32? Oh, my God.
Your NFL roots are showing.
I had a conversation with my folks yesterday where I described picking somebody up at a hospital and thought I had named the hospital. And a minute later, my dad jumps in and goes, "You mean the hospital, right?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you said you picked so-and-so up at the airport." Griff, if you took a scan of my brain right now, it would look like an egg after you take a frying pan and smash it. So jump in whenever. If I'm up to 62 teams in Major League Baseball by the end of this podcast, because I'm moving tomorrow, right? So like I'm just running around. I'm not even thinking.
Got a lot going on, but I do think that Elon Musk or Meta is indeed taking scans of our brains as we speak. So that's just my theory.
Well, in exchange for Elon Musk taking scans of our brains, maybe we can get some of the amplification of certain tweets back.
Yeah,
it would be nice. It would be nice. So I just said I'm actually this. If you're watching on YouTube, this will be the last time you see the white brick background, and it might look a little darker behind me because we're recording late in the evening. The sun is setting in Toronto. It's Sunday night, July the 16th. Griff has been good enough to agree to sit down a day early, the night before we usually record, because Monday the 17th is going to be crazy for me. And as we sit here, Griff, the Jays had a pretty good weekend results-wise against the Arizona Diamondbacks, but I thought we'd play a game. I thought we'd play a game out of the gate. We are going to predict the American League East's final standings, not with win-loss records, but just 1 through 5 at the end of the year. How do we see the American League East playing out? Because it is not quite as obvious as it might have felt like just a few weeks ago.
Right. And I'm glad we're not picking one-loss totals because to me, it's a mug's game when you go, a team is on pace for, because as soon as you win 3 in a row, that pace changes. As soon as you lose 3 in a row, there's like people are pulling their hair out and going, "Oh, now they're done. They're done," because they're only on pace for 84 wins. So yeah, let's just go 1 to 5 in the uber powerful AL East. You go first.
Okay, so the team that I have winning the division is the team that, as we sit here on the night of Sunday, July the 16th, has the fewest losses of anybody in the AL East. The Baltimore Orioles. Tampa Bay is in first place over the Orioles by a game, but the O's have played fewer games. The O's have 3 fewer wins and 1 fewer loss. So Tampa Bay has a 1-game lead the way that breaks down. The Orioles have lost 35 games to Tampa Bay's 36. I think, Griff, the Orioles are the best team in this division. I think they're showing it. They're red hot once again, and they have arguably the best farm system in baseball. And we know that Jackson Holliday, the first overall pick from last year, Matt's son, is not going to get traded, and he's tearing up Double-A right now. But the Orioles do have a bunch of other prospects that teams would covet. I think Baltimore can be aggressive between now and August 1st and make themselves even better. Who do you have winning the division?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll reflect your picks by telling you where I've got that team
I like that. Okay.
selected. So I'll go O's in second place. I'll say the O's will finish second in the division because I really do not believe in their starting pitching. I really do not believe that once those younger starters hit 130, 140 innings, that they can sustain through September, especially when the leverage and the intensity get higher. Now, if they went out at the trade deadline and got a veteran starter to go with their group, their bullpen is outstanding. We all know that. Their young hitters are outstanding because they've finished last so many years in a row, and their farm system is stocked because they finished last so many years in a row. But that does not help the first time that you're in contention, and that's this year. So I do believe that because of the depth of their position player talent and the depth of their bullpen, that I will pick them second in the AL East, which is a tremendous finish for them.
Marcus Stroman to Baltimore. How does that
Then
sound?
I would pick them third.
Oh, you'd be reacquainting with your old pal.
Oh, yeah, my old buddy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Orioles would be coming to Toronto at some point. You'd be saying hello. Okay, so I've got Baltimore winning the division. You've got them finishing second. In second place in the American League East at the end of the season. And this does not reflect a lot of what I've said about them on this podcast through the first 10 weeks. But I can see the Toronto Blue Jays jumping over the Tampa Bay Rays, given the Rays injury situation. I have the Blue Jays finishing second in the division. You?
I have the Blue Jays finishing first in the division because, that's the same reason that I have a Kenyan winning the marathon, because their starting pitching depth, the Blue Jays starting pitching depth, is like training at altitude. It's not a sprint, it's not a half marathon, it's a full marathon. And the Blue Jays, people go, oh, well, the Jays haven't had the injuries and they're sure to come. But I think when the Blue Jays went out and signed the 4 starting pitchers that are making a lot of money, that they took into consideration their record of good health and being out there every 5th day. And we'll discuss later, maybe every 6th day sometime. But I say that the bullpen is underrated. We can talk about that later. The starting pitching is deep and reliable. And the offense, they really haven't been carried by the offense. And like as other teams' pitching staffs reach that wall that they might hit in the division, I think the Jays could slide past both the Rays and the Orioles.
All right. So we disagree. I got Baltimore 1, Blue Jays 2. You got Blue Jays 1, Baltimore 2. I wonder if we're going to start to align here now. I've got the Tampa Bay Rays finishing third. And I'll explain why I don't have a lot of hope for the Yankees once we get to the Yankees. But I do think the Rays are going to manage, Griff, to hold on to third place in the AL East and secure, even if it's the last one, secure a wild card spot.
Yeah, I agree that the Rays, it's amazing that a team that started as hot as they did, and we're both predicting them to finish third in the division, but albeit in the playoffs, they'd probably end up being the third wild card, although, their win total will be around low 90s, I would think. But I just think their bullpen has been on fumes, has been overworked the last couple of years. They've been out front with the opener theory for the last 3 years under Kevin Cash. And their bullpen is, they round guys up with good arms and somehow they get them to overperform. And the injuries to their rotation are starting to catch up with them. Drew Rasmussen out for the year. I just do believe that their offense has overperformed. Their bullpen has always overperformed, and that this division, which is now 70 games above 500 as a group, is just too strong for the Rays to sustain where they are right now.
All right, in fourth place for me, and I'm going to include the Aaron Judge caveat at this point, but if you have ever experienced any kind of turf toe or toe injury, you know it's serious, and you know it's really compromising. And he's got a torn ligament in his big left toe. We don't know. We're just sitting here shooting our mouths off on a podcast in the middle of July. But if you told me that Aaron Judge didn't play again this season, or that he comes back, tries to play, and is severely compromised to the point that they decide to shut him down, I wouldn't be surprised, not in the least. And therefore, if what I feel is the future for Aaron Judge over the next 2+ months comes true, I will pick Boston to finish fourth, and the Yankees, for the first time in God knows how long, to finish last in the division.
So you're saying that if Judge comes back, there's a chance they'll finish ahead of Boston?
If Judge comes back, plays, and does his thing, even if it's not quite to the level he set last year, but does his thing, yeah, they could finish fourth and compete for the last playoff spot or two in the American League. If he doesn't, and I think this toe injury, I know this toe injury is serious, and I think that prognostications of him returning and being himself are extremely optimistic. So with that caveat, I'll go with Boston 4, New York 5.
Well, I'm going to go Boston 4, New York 5, even if Judge does come back. But the great Dizzy Dean, the right-hander for the St. Louis Cardinals, was hit in the toe by a line drive in the All-Star game. I think it might have been in Detroit. I'm not sure. But he never came back. He was never the same pitcher after. He had, had a Hall of Fame career to that point. But as you point out, these injuries can be very difficult to overcome, especially in a game like baseball where your transfer of weight and your power points. I mean, that is a big thing. And whether he comes back or not, I'm not sure that he can carry this team. If you look at the Yankee lineup, I look at box scores. I look when they play the Jays or when they're playing on TV, 5 through 9 or 6 through 9 when Judge is there. That is not a Yankee lineup. That's a fifth place team lineup. And like, you look at Josh Donaldson and what he's done, and he just went on the IL. A lot of their guys have reputations that are not being transferred to performance this season. And you have Nestor Cortez out for the year. There's some other iffy starting pitching. Garrett Cole, of course, is Garrett Cole, and he's a front runner for the Cy right now. But that's not enough to carry you to more than a fifth place finish. And fifth place in the AL East is not a disgrace. I mean, you could be 8 games, 10 games above 500 and finish fifth in the AL East. So I'll take the Red Sox over the Yankees. I'll put the Yankees in fifth place no matter what. And I'll go with the Red Sox, who will probably make a deal or two at the deadline to reinforce the troops. And so I got Jays, O's, Rays, Red Sox, and Yankees.
Okay. And so we're pretty much the same, except I got O's, Jays, Rays, Red Sox, Yankees. And like, what was it, a week or two before the All-Star break, and Aaron Boone is talking about how Isaiah Kiner-Falefa has earned more playing time. Because Donaldson, who, as you said, is now hurt, wasn't doing anything, and really hasn't done anything since the trade with the Twins brought him to New York. Final year of his deal, 38 years old. And DJ LeMahieu's not himself, right? So they're looking for help at third base. and they got Volpe playing short, and he's just a kid, and he's up and down like you'd expect a kid to be, and a below league average hitter, but he's a rookie. So you're right. I mean, I just don't see the threat there. I think an Aaron Judge is the type of guy who comes in, Griff. I talk about this with Vladdy and the Blue Jays. Like I've argued that Vladdy needs to give the Jays 5 or 6 big moments in different games down the stretch here over the final 2 months. Hit a 3-run home run in the 6th inning with 2 on and 2 out to turn a 3-2 deficit into a 5-3 lead, for example. And then you have your bullpen hold that for 9 outs and win the ball game. So Aaron Judge is the type of guy who can do that for New York. So but if he's not there, he can't.
You're saying Vlad has to channel his inner Danny Jansen then? Because Danny Jansen won 2 games on walk-offs earlier in the season. Then he pretty much won that game in Detroit by tying it with a 2-run homer. And if it wasn't for his bases clearing double today, who knows what the end result would have been, although they would have put Swanson in and not Mitch White, and they probably still would have won the game. But yeah, putting Mitch White in and not having him able to give Swanson a day off is really ridiculous. And it's, to me, spells the end of Mitch White here in Toronto.
I tweeted it, Griff. I can't remember who I tweeted it about last year. And I should, but then again, as I told you, my brain is a scrambled egg at this point. But they ran a guy off last year because he was turning low leverage games into high leverage, panic stricken 9th innings. Like if you can't come in low leverage,
5-run lead.
That's what a 5-run lead. And I know Swanson had been loosening because the game was close. It was a 1-run game heading to the bottom of the 8th. But like, if you can't come in and make it so that your high leverage guy can take the day, now it's easier today because the Jays don't play Monday, right?
Yep.
So they've got the day off, so they'll have all hands on deck on Tuesday. But if you can't work out a low leverage and you turn low leverage into adventure land, you're not going to be around long.
Yeah, I mean, if Mitch White had got ponged on a couple of line drives to the wall, that would have been one thing, but he walked the first guy that he faced.
Throw strikes,
that's all. And if your best stuff isn't good enough to get hitters out, then the coaching staff knows that, the fans can see that, and you're going to have a short tenure wherever you are in the major leagues. And that's where Mitch White is right now,
right?
Which leaves room later on to add guys like Ryu or Chad Green or whatever. I mean, there is room at the back end or at the middle end of this bullpen to add more guys without diminishing the roles of guys like Tim Meza and Swanson and Romano.
Yeah, and I know you've got theories on the direction the rotation is going, but a springboard for that conversation is Yusei Kikuchi, and as we're talking, it's Sunday night, July the 16th. If you're a fan of our program, that we usually record on Monday mornings, but I am moving tomorrow, so Griff is sitting down with me tonight so we can get one in for you. It is probably Monday, though, when you're listening, because I don't think we're going to upload it till Monday morning. But Kikuchi, and you get to the point, Griff, where he's 4 2/3 innings deep and only a couple of runs have crossed, and Jay Jackson comes in and finishes off the 5th, and onward they go, and they don't allow another run. But I want to believe enough in Kikuchi to be part of this grander plan with the rotation. But the first inning, 2 outs, nobody on, runs one in on Lourdes Gurriel, hits him, walks the cleanup hitter, then gets out of it, but not without, then he sails. It was the second inning he got out of it. Then he sails the pickoff attempt into center field, and that leads to a run. He is a pitch away from a 9 or 10 pitch, 3 up, 3 down first inning. But then we got to navigate the icebergs again with this guy. Same thing in the second inning. I've never seen well, I probably have, but I don't feel like I have recency bias. I've never seen a guy make things so difficult when it's so clear that he's got plus stuff. He's got such great stuff. Guys would kill for his stuff.
Yeah, I think you don't even have to be an analytics nerd to realize. You can just look at his splits for his career, which, it showed today, or showed Sunday, that John Schneider does not have full confidence in Yusei Kikuchi. He got 4 2/3 innings and needed 1 out for the win, had the lead, and he wouldn't let him stay into that game. The second half numbers, if you look at his career splits, and especially his 2021 split, when he was an all-star at the halfway mark, and then in the second half he was 1-6 in 13 starts with a 5.98 ERA and a 1.7 WHIP, and you go, well, maybe that's just a coincidence. But his numbers for his career, he's got a 5.94 second half ERA for his career. So now we're getting into that stage of the season, and you got to believe, you got to know that John Schneider and Pete Walker and the coaches are well aware of his failure in the second half. And like, he's got great stuff, but if you can't command it, we saw what happened to Alek Manoah earlier in the season, where what was perhaps the similar velocity, similar movement, but they say that his movement wasn't that great, but his mechanics failed. But Kikuchi, there's no change other than the fact that he can't maintain what he had in the first half, and it's consistent through his career. So I would say that there's a chance that if Ryu is going to go into the rotation at some point, it will be that Kikuchi spot, and that there are ways where for long periods of time you could have Kikuchi coming out of the bullpen and getting 4 or 5 middle of the game outs with his and being able to let it loose and maybe get up to 97, 98 miles an hour and maybe focus more for a shorter period of time.
Yeah, when you mentioned Kikuchi's whip, I say nene. Watch me whip, watch me nene. No, we're not going down. You're not jumping in on that one.
I'm not going to jump in on that.
I don't blame you. Not touching that. Yeah, they did it last year, right? And there was a start about a month ago, Griff, where Kikuchi slammed his glove on the dugout bench when Schneider came over after 5 innings and told him he was lifting him. I think it was about 80 pitches or something like that. And I appreciated seeing the intensity of Kikuchi. But I'm thinking at the time, you say you need to do that for about a month straight worth of starts before your manager's going to give you the 6th or the 7th. Like you have to earn this trust.
Scotty, I remember in 1976, going back to the early Expos or the Jerry Park Expos, Clay Kirby was a usable right-handed starter from the Padres, and then he's traded to the Expos in the heart of his career, and he got the start. Carl Keel was the manager at the start of that year before he got fired, and Clay Kirby walked the first 5 hitters in the game, and Keel went to the mound, took him out. He slammed his glove in the dugout, and he said, "He never lets me get out of my own jams." And everybody would go like, "What? Just walk the first 5 hitters in the game." So
I was just getting warmed up.
There are various degrees of losing your temper and being admired for it. But in Clay Kirby's case, there was no admiration in that dugout for a guy who had just shit the bed, basically.
If you're watching on YouTube at youtube.com/exit philosophy, Griff, when you move your head, and that reflective ring off the photo behind you, I feel like that ring's going to expand and like jump out at you and like swallow you up or something.
Well, by next
like
week,
the movie The Ring.
By next week, I have a couple of photos or a couple of framed portraits that I'm going to have back there so that the ring can just hit the wall. One of them is Vlad Sr., Vlad Jr. in the dugout, signed by both guys. Well, not when he was 5 years old, but recently.
Yeah.
That'll be on
But
one
is that the young Vlad in the Expos uniform at the
yeah.
Big O,
Sitting
or
in
is
the
that a more
dugout
recent?
Yeah, and
Okay.
at the Big O. And
Yeah.
then the other one is Jose Bautista's bat flip. So they'll be like flanking my head. So much better than moving my head and looking like I'm a saint.
Jose's going to be in town in a few weeks.
Yeah.
The big Level of Excellence Day.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation, so I got to shout my dad out because he's definitely going to be listening. And if I don't credit him for bringing this up, then he'll kindly, I'm sure, tease me on text about it. But he said Edwin's got to be up on the Level of Excellence at some point too, doesn't he? You know, this is a month from now. It's Jose's time.
Yeah.
And we know that this takes a few years. But could you foresee Edwin Encarnacion being up on the Level of Excellence at some point in the next couple seasons? I think he is absolutely worthy of it. You don't?
No, I don't think he'll ever be up on the Level of Excellence. He had an excellent career with the Jays, but it was almost to the point when he came over as a throw-in as a third baseman. And they felt like they should have had netting there behind first base to save those fans. But
yes, E5 was his nickname, and it was justified. But he went across the diamond, played first base. He was a DH. It was hit in the middle of the order for those exciting mid-2010s teams. I know, like, there's people say, well, then what about Vernon Wells? And
yeah, I mean, you can count the names on the Level of Excellence, and maybe we can get Bautista to do it. One, two,
3, 4.
Like he counted media members who came to
only you and I know what the hell. Well, and
yeah, well, I just got to explain that he used to count whenever there was a controversy and there'd be a gang of media members around his locker. He would count and say, "You only come to my locker when there's controversy."
yeah. You only come to talk to me when there's controversy, and I'm standing there thinking to myself, because I always found it humorous, right? I always found it humorous with Jose because it felt like a game, although I think he was serious about it.
I loved Jose when he did that stuff.
Oh, I thought it was great. I mean, I even said one day, you know how the Ohio State Buckeyes football team, all the players start with no decals on their helmets, and then by the end of the year, big plays, they end up with all the, I don't know, I guess they're Buckeyes.
They're Buckeyes, yeah.
Hell if I know, but all the decals. And I remember walking in early one season to the media lunchroom, and I can't remember if it was you or Greg. You would remember if I said it, but Greg or Chisholm, I said, Shai Davidi, said, we got to get a football helmet. And we've got to buy colored stickers. And we need to assign each regular member of the beat a color. And every time Jose rolls his eyes at someone's question, or otherwise in our humorous way sort of makes us look dumb, that person applies their color sticker to the helmet. And at the end of the year, we count them all up and you got bragging rights.
The little mini Blue Jay type things on a helmet. We would have run out of those decals.
Yeah, but that there was that controversy. I can't even remember what it was. But we walked up to him and he looked up, unimpressed, and then he proceeded. There was like a dozen of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, and he went all the way around and counted all the way up to 12. And the interactions were great. Although I'll never forget, Melky was on the team and was involved in this, so it was. I'm guessing it was 14 because Melky was here. Melky Cabrera in 13 and 14. But we were in Oakland, and a controversial play had happened in the top of the 9th inning, and the Jays had lost. You're so much better recollecting details like this than me, Griff. If you remember, jump in and say what it was. But I'll never forget, Jose came out of the shower and kind of was toweled up or whatever, and was back to us facing his locker. And I walked over to him because I figured we got to get Jose to talk about this because it was a crappy ending to the ball game. And I said, Jose, he looked over his shoulder at me, grabbed his Blue Jays cap, turned around, I'm ready.
Yeah, it was.
And he went to town.
It was an umpire's decision that cost the Jays the game. And he knew his role. And his role at that point was to talk about it. And he was ready to talk about it. And he just blasted away. But he went over and like he was just waiting. If nobody had gone, he would have been very disappointed.
Oh yeah, he very. And I was kind of taken aback because usually there was a song and dance, right? It will be interesting for me to hear what you want to talk about. We say this in we're peeling the curtain back a little bit, but we say it all in good fun. I always found it humorous, even if he didn't. And when he did speak, it was thoughtful, it was clear, and
there weren't a lot of cliches.
There weren't a lot of cliches, and you had to be very specific. I remember 2013. So this would have been, well, maybe it was 14 because he spent most of the last 2 months injured in 13. Remember that play at the plate? He jammed his hip bone or something. And so, but he was traveling with the team for most of that final 2 months. But anyway, he was playing at the time. It was a road clubhouse. He was sitting in the corner. He had the double locker. And I asked a question about the Blue Jays' reliance on the home run to score runs. And I phrased it as you guys score the majority of your runs via the home run. I don't agree with that. And he took me to task on it. And the way I should have worded it was, you guys lead the league in percentage of runs scored via the home run. Because at that point, 47% of their runs scored were via the home run at that point of the probably 14 season. So the majority of their runs, 53%, were not via the home run. And so he looked right at, I don't agree with that. That's wrong. And the way I worded it, he was right, I was wrong. I should have worded it better. And I'm standing there going, Jose, you know what I'm trying to get at? I just am trying to ask, do you think the offense needs to be a little bit more versatile? Like, he knew where I was going, but I think he was down to the detail.
I think it was a sports hernia that he had. And I think the incident you're referring to was in Tampa. It might have been in the visiting Tampa clubhouse.
Okay, that might make sense. Yep. You were there for that. Okay.
Yeah.
You take all mental notes on encounters of the strange kind. Yeah. But it'll be, I think it'll be a fantastic day. And we were there in 13 when Carlos Delgado went up on the level of excellence. And I'm sure it'll be a great day for Jose and his family to be back in Toronto. And he is absolutely worthy of it. And how much fun it was to covering him. We're laughing about it. We got stories about him all, but to watch him play every day when he was in his prime was really cool.
Yeah, and there are presences within every clubhouse, and he was the Blue Jays presence when he was on that roster. Like, everyone looked to him, all the players looked to him, all the media looked to him for comment on anything, and you've already outlined a bunch of times that happened. But yeah, he was so important to those teams and deserves every accolade that he gets as a member of the Blue Jays for those seasons.
So let's circle back to theories about the starting rotation. And Griff, this is a topic that you've been fleshing out for most of the season. You've already written columns on it, and you tracked it very closely, especially with the Alek Manoah demotion in early June and for the weeks leading up to that, because it was becoming clear that Alek was going to need some kind of reprieve. We're now at a point here where, blink, you wake up one day and there's 2.5 months left in the regular season. Hyunjin Ryu pitched very well over the weekend in Buffalo. So encouraging. Again, now they don't have to bring him up for a couple of more weeks. I think they got 2.5-ish weeks remaining in the 30-day rehabilitation window. So theoretically, Ryu could make 2 or 3 more starts in Buffalo before he joins the Blue Jays. And Alek Manoah appears to be, well, he is back. And hopefully he can pitch well enough to maintain his spot, and that'll feed into a 6-man rotation for a period of time.
Yeah, my theory, and I've run it by some people who should know, and they sort of nod in agreement, is that when the Blue Jays sent Alek Manoah to the minor leagues and he was down for 33 days, they were running on a 4-man rotation. And by the end of that, Gausman reacted. I mean, you don't usually hear veteran pitchers react like he did and say, yeah, I could use that extra day. And, you know, it's not a big deal. But when you say I could use that extra day, it's not a big deal. It means it is a big deal. So they went over a month using a 4-man rotation. So the theory is that when Ryu is ready to pitch, and it looks like he might have 3 more starts in the minor leagues, and if Manoah is continuing to give you 5 or 6 innings, continuing, it was a great outing that he had, or a very encouraging outing that he had in Detroit on the Friday night before the All-Star break. And it was a really good move by the Jays to allow him to start there, because they could have always sent him to Buffalo for 1 more start, because once you use an option, it's for the whole year. So they could have sent him down for another start, but he showed that he had earned another start in the big leagues and not at AAA. So once they get into a situation where they're going to need a 5th starter and a 6th starter, they can use off days to have every pitcher with 5 full days rest between July 22nd and September 12th. And when you get to September 12th, that's 40 some days, 48 days where you've given your starting pitchers 5 days of rest. So they're pitching on their 6th day every time. And Ryu is in that group. Manoah is in that group. And I've gone through the entire schedule and seen that you only need that 6th starter 5 times with the off days, using the off days. And then when you get to September 12th, and the rest of the games are against AL East contenders and the Texas Rangers. So you've got tough competition down the stretch where it's, nut cutting time, where you're going to either make the playoffs or not. Then you can cut it back down to your 5 best guys. Kikuchi probably go to the bullpen. And if Ryu is still pitching well, then he'd be a 5th guy in there. And you go down the stretch with Meza and Kikuchi as left-handers out of the pen. And it just makes sense. And there are people that agree with that a month, just over a month, using a 6-man rotation and having everybody with that extra day of rest would be the best thing moving forward. And we talked about it earlier in this podcast, is that other teams don't have that luxury. Other teams are looking to trade for a member of the rotation to add. And you look at the Orioles, and they've got either some young guys who don't have a history of a lot of innings, or veterans that are not that good. So I think the Jays are in the driver's seat in terms of being able to manipulate and get into a 6-man rotation and be rested down the stretch in September, which is one of the reasons why, when we're going through it, I picked them to move up through the standings between now and September 12th. And September 12th is a key. Going down the stretch, they got nothing but tough games. And with the record that they've had within the division, they better turn it around in terms of being able to compete.
I think this team needs a bat as much as anything, or more than anything, at the deadline, Griff. And I have been on the record repeatedly as saying I think they need a starting pitcher. I think they need another reliever. And I think they need a bat, or maybe even 2. I realize that's being excruciatingly greedy. And I am willing to be convinced that Alek Manoah and Hyunjin Ryu joining the rotation will be enough. And I'm pro them going to get a high leverage arm, but I'm also willing to concede that they know more than me, and that if Chad Green is the big acquisition, of course, he's working back from injury and hasn't pitched for the Blue Jays yet. If he's the big acquisition for the bullpen, okay, I'll buy that. This lineup needs to get longer. It needs to get longer. And I would like to see the Blue Jays be aggressive in going and getting somebody who can hit in the middle of the lineup, and when I say that, I mean 5-6-ish, to lengthen things out a little bit. I'm not willing to sit here and presume at this point that people like Alejandro Kirk are just going to find it, because it hasn't happened yet, and we're 3.5 months in.
Yeah, that bat that to lengthen the lineup to me would have to be a right-handed bat, because to our surprise, Brandon Belt has been doing the job. I don't think Brandon Belt should be batting third in the order, or even fourth. But the Mark Canha is available from the Mets, and he's a right-hand hitter, plays the outfield, plays first base. That might be the type of guy that they could get at the deadline, who could lengthen the lineup a little bit. I think the belief that Alejandro Kirk could be your right-handed pinch hitter, or a DH, sorry, right-handed DH to Brandon Belt's left-handed DH is the reason why they went out and they got Dalton Varsho, because Varsho has the ability to catch in the major leagues. And so far, that hasn't even been a factor. I mean, I don't think he's ever caught a bullpen since spring training. And it would be unusual to see him put the gear on if there was an injury and Kirk was DHing at the time. But I don't think Kirk is the answer, the way he's swinging the bat. And it's, as you said, it's 3.5 months in, and nothing is showing that he's going to be changing anytime soon. He's young. Maybe it's just a lull in his career. But for this year, they can't be concerned about lulls in players' career if they want to go for it. And I'd say the only area they need is a right-handed bat to lengthen the lineup, and that might be the type of player that they could use. The bullpen, I think Jimmy Garcia had a good year last year. He's had his ups and his downs have been atrocious this year. But I think that with Chad Green and Jimmy Garcia emerging again, that they have enough depth. Nate Pearson has stepped up.
Mesa's been awesome.
Who
awesome? Tim Mesa's been awesome.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely.
Awesome. Trevor Richards has been, I joked last year, Griff, that Trevor Richards went gray watching himself pitch. But it's the volatility of that spot, right? Richards great again after a tough one last year. Mesa, who I didn't think was all that good last year, although the numbers would suggest he was better than I pegged him, is elite this year. And they're not even talking about finding windows for him anymore because he's getting everybody out.
Yeah, I think Adam Simber's failure earlier in the season, and nobody talks about him, and he's on the IL, and nobody talks about him or misses him at all. But and Jay Jackson has been usable. He's the only guy in this 9-game stretch who has 2 victories. And I know that you're not a big fan of wins for pitchers, but he has been another one of those guys who's been reliable coming out of the pen that nobody was expecting. So, to me, the bullpen is fine, especially if you're going to be on a streak like this where you're winning 8 out of 9, and they're going to have to do it again a couple of times before the end of the season. And Jordan Romano, whether he was healthy or not, can't save all of those games. If you're winning 8 games in a row, you need 2 or 3 guys who can nail down the 9th inning. And Swanson seems to be one. Romano, of course, is. And who knows about Chad Green, but it seemed Tim Mesa, if he was asked if it was a string of left-handers out there, he'd be able to do it. So I think the bullpen is deep enough, but the right-handed hitter to lengthen the lineup and to give some flexibility is a necessity at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I know they stink against left-handed pitching this year. And I'm thinking, and it's less relevant now because you don't play as many games within your division. Shane McClanahan is the stud for the Tampa Bay Rays, but Chris Sale can't stay healthy in Boston anymore. Nestor Cortez is down for the Yankees and isn't coming back. Like, some of those lefties you would see more often as divisional opponents aren't there now. Here's a name, Griff, and I might jump out on your answer or your reply to this theory in advance by saying, I think you might say, well, if they like him enough, they should go target him as a free agent in the offseason. And they do have a glut of outfielders right now, right? They got Kiermaier, Varsho, and Springer, and then they've got Merrifield, who will be out there and play left field for them. So the response to the question, or to the name I'm going to throw out there, is, well, what would you do with everybody else? And I haven't even thought about that. But Cody Bellinger is having a hell of a year for the Cubs. Now, I know he's a left-handed hitter, but he's a great defender, and he has found himself after 2 down years with the Dodgers, which I think may have been a combination of things, but the fact that he had a pretty significant injury a couple of years ago, and when it's into the wrist and the hand and all that, it can take you a while to be yourself again. But he seems to have unlocked it with the Cubs this year, and all the talk is the Cubs, because they're not quite there yet, are willing to trade some of their better ball players, as they continue to build up toward hopefully being good again. I just wonder if Bellinger's a guy.
Yeah, Bellinger would be a guy, but he's a rental and he's not going to re-sign a long-term with the Jays. First of all, they have other people way ahead of him in that money line waiting for contracts. But Dalton Varsho is a guy, he's better than Dalton Varsho at this point. However, Varsho is under control for another 3 or 4 years. And so I think that is the determining factor there, plus the fact that at the trade deadline, there's going to be 3 or 4 teams looking for Bellinger. And I think that the list of prospects is more than the Blue Jays would be willing to give up for that half season. So I think they'll run with what they've got and see where it goes, unless they add a guy like Mark Canha. It's like Bellinger's the bauble. He's the star attraction there. But I think he's going, but he's not going to the Blue Jays as far as I'm concerned.
We think Alek Manoah is going to start Tuesday against the San Diego Padres. Yeah, he thinks he is, and I presume he will, because Kevin Gausman is up in the air at this point, and the Blue Jays, with the off day Monday, technically don't need a 5th starter until Saturday if they need to push Gausman that far. They theoretically could go Manoah, Barrios, and Bassett Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday against the Pods. Gotta hope for Manoah that he carries it over from Detroit, because I know the Padres are extremely disappointing this year, but this is theoretically and literally a much better lineup than Detroit. And he's also pitching at home again for the first time since everything went down. Have to hope for a good performance from him.
It'll be interesting to see, and I don't think he needs to duplicate what he did at Comerica Park. I don't think he will duplicate what he did, but he just has to show that he's throwing competitive pitches and that his breaking ball and his velocity are back. You see him in the dugout in the time that since he pitched that Friday in Detroit, and he seems a different person than he was earlier in the year when he was struggling. He's a young kid, and it tends to get to you a little more as a young pitcher, as a young player, than it would a veteran player. And just to see him interact with his teammates in the dugout in the last week since the All-Star break. Because at the All-Star game last year, he was the 3 punchy guy. He was talking to John Smoltz on the headset during the inning, and that's a long drop from there to where he was when he was sent to the complex league and then got tonged by teenagers for 11 runs in 2 2/3 innings. So to see him bounce back and at least show a little of his former life, and I'm going to be talking to him this week. So I'll have a column on that later in the week, but I'm just hoping that he is back to who he was, because I told him after his rookie season, I said, please don't ever change. Continue to be who you are. And he smiled and he said, don't worry, I will not. Now, evolution is different than change. Like, you got to evolve as a young player. So I'll ask him how he has evolved and whether he has changed. But he was such a good guy in that rookie season. And then last year until the Seattle game where he took it on the chin. But to see him bounce back would be tremendous.
Yeah, and I firmly believe, and again, it's 2022 is such a difficult bar to carry forward as a young player. You really do have to go back and baseball reference the hell out of Alek Manoah's season last year to understand just how good he was. I mean, years like that don't happen to most pitchers ever. So the bar was really high, but I really do believe in this guy, Griff. And if he never pitches again like he did in 2022, that doesn't mean he's not going to have a number of really good seasons. And I do think he'll look at the first half of 2023, 17 years from now, when he's freshly retired and looking back on a successful career, and he'll say to himself, I learned a few things, right? And maybe even some of that is off-season work, right? Like, guys have to. Vladdy learned that in 2019 into 2020 we can't repeat that off-season, and he came into camp in 2021 like a madman after a really good winter, and look what it did for him. Yeah, I think it's just lessons.
The thing with Manoah is that, like, the cliche is the sophomore jinx. So if 2023 had happened in 2022, people would have said, oh yeah, sophomore jinx, give him a year and he'll be back. And the fact that he had a better follow-up season than his rookie season led people to think there'd be no downturn in his career, and there always is. And the first half of 2023 was that downturn, and to see if he can bounce back from that is what we're waiting for right now.
All right, let's flip to Griff's riffs here. So I remember in the years that I did 162 games, home, road, commercial flights, hotels, you name it, that anytime there was an off day in between home series, which is what, twice a year, maybe 3 times a year.
Maybe.
It's usually on off days, you're in the middle of a road trip, so you're going from one city to another, or you're coming home from a road trip, or you're heading out on a road trip. So the fact that there's an off day in between 2 home series, which the Blue Jays have on Monday, July the 17th, affords you the opportunity to maybe catch up with your loved ones if you have a family, and also affords you the opportunity to get there and hit the links. And so what would I put the over under at? Are the Jays doing a golf thing tomorrow?
No, they did one earlier in the season on one of the other off days at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it's kind of a chill day for the guys. I'll put the over under at 12.5 Jays hitting the links tomorrow.
I'd take the over on that. Yeah.
Take the over.
Yeah,
okay,
I'd take the over on that.
Most of those guys are golfers. All right. So it'll be a day on the links and an opportunity to unwind, and you don't have to get on an airplane and all that stuff. But Griff's riffs, take us back to what? 1997?
It was 1997. It was it was my 3rd year at the Star, and I volunteered to write for the golf supplement in the Star, which is, of course, gives details on all the GTA courses that you can play, and it's interspersed with interesting stories from around the golf world. So I volunteered to take Roger Clemens, who was in his first season with the Jays, and he had just come over from Boston. Pat Henkin, who was a lifelong Jay, and now one of my favorite players ever.
Just won a Cy Young Award.
Yeah, and Erik Hanson, who was Roger Clemens' buddy. So when I invited Roger to play with me at Innisbrook, where they hold the Valspar every year, the PGA tournament, I figured I better invite Hanson, because that's how I would get Clemens to play with me and Pat. So they accepted. Clemens was living at the Innisbrook Resort, and of course he was the last one to show up for the tee time, and he was the only one living there. So we got to the first tee, and this group of guys from Boston were waiting to tee off. They were after us, and we were delayed, and we were waiting for Roger to come. So they're waiting and going like, "Can we play through?" We said no. And here comes Roger, and these guys from Boston are all over him, like they're, "Oh, Roger, we're gonna miss you in Boston. We're gonna miss you in Boston." And one of these loudmouth boobs comes back, and I'm standing with Henkin, and he goes, "Roger, what a great guy, what a great pitcher, and what do you do?" And Pat goes, "I'm last year's Cy Young Award winner."
Yes.
Yes. So we go out on the course, and my photographer's never shot golf before, so it's standing right in front of Clemens when he's hitting a 2-iron, and Roger just casually says, "Excuse me, the green is that way. Could you please get out of the way?"
Roger is like Tiger Woods when those old cameras used to go off and make the noise.
Yeah. Roger is a dedicated, true dick on the golf course.
Yeah, sure.
And Hanson is just all the time that way. And so we get to a par 5. So I'm taking notes because I'm writing a feature on this. So we get to a par 5, and Henkin hits a tree off the tee. Then he scuffs the 3-wood across the fairway, chips it up onto the green, and 2 putts for a 5. And Clemens hits a monster drive, misses the green just to the left, chips it up, and misses a 4-footer for a birdie. So he gets a 5. And then, to my mind, Cy Young, par 5. There's different ways to skin a cat. You don't have to be Roger Clemens to arrive at the same place. And that was the lesson that I was teaching with the round of golf, with the feature that I did. And on the last hole, Erik Hanson hit a 6-iron over the green, par 4, over the green, halfway up the trees. And then he turns to me and he goes, "These yardages must be wrong," which gave me the lesson that it's never a pitcher. A pitcher's never wrong. A pitcher never throws a bad pitch. A golfer never misreads the yardage or anything. It must be the course's fault.
Erik Hanson, for most of his time in Toronto, the footages must be wrong out there. Surely that center field wall is only 350 feet, even though it says 400. I mean, this can't be. My Erik Hanson story is not.
I got one more on this round.
Okay, tell it.
So my son Matt was 13 at the time, and he followed us around. He walked around the golf course with us, and he had a new baseball in his pocket that he wanted the 2 Cy Young Award winners to sign. He wanted Henkin and he wanted Clemens, and it was going to be the ball that he saved forever. So we get out, and Clemens goes to the pro shop, and while he's there, Matt pulls out the baseball and hands it to Clemens, or hands it to Pat Henkin, and Henkin signs it. And then Erik Hanson goes, "Oh, you're looking for signatures," and he grabs the ball and signs it. And that ruined the baseball. And I'm telling this story in Seattle, where Erik Hanson lives. 10 years later, I'm telling this story, and the writers, I think Shai was there, a couple of others, and I'm finished the story, and guys are laughing, and Hanson walks around the corner of the clubhouse, and he's wearing golf shoes. He just got off the golf course. What a dick.
Anybody need a baseball to sign? My Erik Hanson story goes back to my teenage years. So one of the things we used to do as a family was we would take an annual summer baseball trip. And most of the time we'd follow the Blue Jays around. And back then, the Milwaukee Brewers were still an American League team. even though they were in the Central at that point, because it's 1996. So the 3 divisional per league alignment had come into play, but that's not the point. Erik Hanson's a Blue Jay. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, who actually would turn 100 this year if he was still alive in September, just an awesome guy. Miss him, think of him every day, miss him every day. And he would talk to anybody. So, if he'd be out in the garden and people come by walking their dogs and stuff, my grandfather had a conversation with everybody. So we're at the Milwaukee hotel where the Jays are staying, and he sees Erik Hanson standing by the elevator. Again, this is my grandfather. At the time, he'd be 75-ish, 73, 74, 75 years old. And he walks over to Erik Hanson and he says, "So are we going to win today?" And, the answer I'm about to give you is not all that offensive, and it could be construed as kind of playful, except it wasn't with the tone of voice and the look on the face. "Well, if I knew that, we wouldn't have to play today, would we?" This dude, my grandfather's like a 73-year-old man, harmless, friendly, and couldn't even spare 5 seconds to humor an old ball fan whose first favorite player was Stan Musial because he grew up in Regina and the St. Louis Cardinals were the westernmost team at the time. I was just like,
that's the Erik Hanson I know.
Yeah, I'm not big on that. Like, screw off.
Yeah.
Griff, we're digressing into a whole other area here now, and I was just a teenager, but I followed it closely. I remember thinking, man, we're in the Erik Hanson is your ace era. Like, remember they signed him before the 96 season, and then correct me, he threw opening night. Now, Henkin ended up winning the Cy Young that year, and they went and got Clemens the following winter. But I just remember thinking, because I'm 16, 17, I grew up in the 80s. I didn't know the Jays could be good. I didn't know the Jays could be bad and the Leafs could be good until the early to mid 90s. I had no context for the Jays sucking. And when Hanson was the opening night pitcher, I'm like, man, this ain't Dave Stieb, Jimmy Key, Jack Morris anymore, man. It just isn't.
I think one year that he was a Blue Jays starter, he was injured for most of the season, and but he would bring his clubs on the road, and he'd managed to play golf even with whatever the injury he had was. So in a column for the Star, I wrote that only Tiger Woods is making more money this year playing golf than Erik Hanson. Which at the time was true. Actually.
I mean, it's a classic line. Did it get back to Erik Hanson, and was there a conversation about it?
It wouldn't have changed the way he talked to me. So
yeah, I mean, at that point, who cares, right?
Yeah, that I don't know where that baseball that Matt got signed is, but I know it's not in a trophy case anywhere.
I'm guessing he turned it and put it in the window so the sun could shine on it right at where Hanson signed it, so that the Henkin and Clemens signatures are protected, but the sun has faded out.
That's an old collector trick, I guess.
Here we are crapping all over Erik Hanson, who's, probably just living his life at 58 years old now.
Yeah, playing golf every day. I'll check my subscriber list, see if he's an Exit Philosophy subscriber.
Well,
if he is, I'll apologize.
Yeah, you can comment if you're watching on YouTube, comment section at E Hanson Golf. If that shows up, we'll know it's him. By the time we record our next podcast, Griff, the Jays will have hosted the Padres for 3 Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoon. They played the Thursday afternoon getaway, presumably because the Padres have to get home, but also the Jays are going west.
Yeah,
Seattle.
Yeah, they got.
And then
I
Chavez
don't think they
Ravine.
have an off day. I think they play the next day, so they're playing at 1:00 so they can get a flight and be out there. Yeah,
That's right. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they'll start Friday night in Seattle, and then they go to Dodger Stadium starting a week Monday for 3. But Seattle, we'll talk about this at the end of it because that's when we'll record next, barring the unforeseen. But I'm telling you, Minnesota's a lot of fun. Detroit's a lot of fun. Cleveland's a lot of fun. I'm thinking of all the places in close proximity to Blue Jays fans. They go to Pittsburgh more often now. 5-hour drive from Toronto. Pittsburgh's a lot of fun. A lot of blue. If you are a Blue Jays fan and you can afford it, you have got to make sure you experience the summer weekend in Seattle when the Jays are there at some point. Yep. I'm telling you, I cannot talk about this and do it justice. It is unbelievable. And I'm not just talking about the vibe in the stadium for the 3-hour game, the streets, the bars after games, the whole thing.
Yeah, no,
it's so unique and amazing.
Yeah, it's a great experience. They open the gates 2 hours before the game, and the Jays are taking batting practice. It's like a river of blue going down all the aisles, going concourses, and then down all the aisles. It's amazing to watch because it happens every game that they play there. They've made the Blue Jays games premium tickets so that they can charge more. They know they're going to sell all those tickets. And during the game, it's like 50-50 or more cheering for the Jays. It's a tremendous, tremendous atmosphere. And as you said, Scotty, if you can afford it, because the hotel people jack their prices too. If you can afford it, and it's not this year, then schedule yourself for next year or the year after because it's worth it. It should be on everybody's bucket list.
Yeah, and again, if you can afford it, stay in Seattle. Don't go down to the dinky hotel in Tacoma. You want to be in Seattle.
Yep.
For that whole thing. Is Elysian Field still there? And if I mispronounce that remember that bar?
Yeah, it is.
Last
time I was there, I did an interview with Ricky Romero's brother from there when Ricky Romero's brother was still in high school and was looking for a scholarship offer from Fullerton. And I did the interview with him. I didn't tell him I was in Elysian Field, but I mean, when you say my memory about details is pretty good, like you say Elysian Field, I say, yeah, I interviewed Ricky Romero's brother.
I think that's got to be a book you write. Bars I interviewed people in.
Yeah.
Places I went. Yeah. Well, we're mourning Steph's in San Francisco, which shut down. We're still mourning that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Ricky Romero, and I'm throwing this out there because I half know, but future guest on the Exit Philosophy podcast, Ricky Romero.
It'll be cool.
Not next week, not in the next couple of weeks, but I think Ricky will get him lined up at some point here.
Is there room on the screen?
In August.
On the YouTube screen?
You're it's your account we're using here, Griff. So we're gonna have to get
I'll have to study up on that and make sure that we can get him like maybe above, and he'd be the apex of the triangle.
Yeah, don't ask me how to do it. Is it gallery view on Zoom? Or
whatever.
We're doing this. Yeah.
But we will have him. We promise we will.
We'll get into panic mode about that now, and we are also hoping to have a few other guests join us as the season wears on. But for the time being, Jays are off on Monday the 17th. They got 3 at home against the Padres, and then they head out west to Seattle and Los Angeles for a big road trip and a lot of fun in Seattle. No question about that. We also know there are a bunch of Jays fans in LA because there's expats everywhere. And so I would imagine there will be some Blue Jays blue in Dodger Stadium when they're there as well. We'll hit you again in about a week. But for the time being, that's a wrap for episode 11 of Exit Philosophy. You want to go check out griffsthepitch.com, griffsthepitch.com for Griff's multiple weekly baseball and Blue Jays columns, a weekly power rankings column featuring all 30 MLB teams, huh?
Yeah, we
I
learned.
said 32 earlier.
We're not too old to learn.
Yeah, not too old to learn, although I'm just happy I remembered this time. And you can also get the Exit Philosophy podcast link to that. And Griff also has exclusive conversations with some of the game's greats, and that includes a lot of former Blue Jays and Montreal Expos. You can like, comment, subscribe. Exit Philosophy is on YouTube at youtube.com/Exit Philosophy. And of course, we're available wherever you get your podcasts. And that's probably how you just heard us. Please subscribe and please rate us as well. Have a wonderful week. May the Blue Jays hot streak, 4 in a row, 8 of 10 as we sit here right now continue. And we'll catch you in 7 days.
Have a good moving day, Scotty.
I will.
All right. Thank you, everyone.